The gunshot that killed Daniel Dawson echoed across the canyon, and took with it the only family Delilah had left in this world. She stood at his graveside 3 days later, March 1884, watching the preacher's mouth move without hearing the words, her hands blistered and raw from digging the hole herself when no one else would come. Her father had made enemies in Pendleton, Oregon, men who thought a woman had no right inheriting 2,000 acres of prime grazing land, and they would see her fail before summer turned the grass golden. The ranch house felt cavernous that first night alone. Delilah sat at the kitchen table with her father's ledgers spread before her, the numbers swimming in the lamplight. 23 years old, and she had never balanced accounts or negotiated cattle prices. Her father had taught her to rope and ride, to brand and break horses, but he had kept the business side close to his chest, perhaps thinking he had more time. The Rocking D Ranch employed 6 hands before winter, but 4 had quit the day after the funeral, unwilling to take orders from a woman. The remaining 2 were old Charlie Meston and his nephew Pete, both good men but not enough to run a spread this size. She woke before dawn to the sound of cattle lowing in distress. Pulling on her boots and grabbing her rifle, she ran to the north pasture to find the fence cut clean through, 20 head of her best breeding stock scattered into the hills. Delilah spent the entire day tracking them down, her horse lathered and blowing hard by the time she drove the last steer back through the makeshift repairs Charlie had hammered together. Her hands shook as she unsaddled her mare, not from exhaustion but from the cold realization that this was only the beginning. The banker came calling on the 5th day. Horace Pittman arrived in a black carriage that seemed too fine for the rutted road leading to her ranch, his rounded belly straining against a vest embroidered with gold thread. He refused her offer of coffee and got straight to business, setting a folder on the same kitchen table where she had cried herself empty the night before. "Your father owed the bank $8,000, Miss Dawson. The note comes due in October." Delilah felt the floor tilt beneath her chair. "That cannot be right. He never mentioned any debt. Ranch expansion is expensive. He borrowed against the land 2 years ago to buy more breeding stock and improve the infrastructure. With the price of beef dropping, well, he fell behind on payments." Pittman's eyes were small and shrewd behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "I am prepared to make you a very generous offer for the property. You could start fresh, somewhere easier for a woman alone. This ranch has been in my family for 15 years. I am not selling." "Then you need to come up with $8,000 in 7 months, plus interest." He stood, brushing dust from his trousers as though her poverty might be contagious. "Think about it, Miss Dawson. Pride is expensive." After he left, she sat staring at the folder until the sun moved across the floor. $8,000. She would need to sell nearly 400 head at current prices, but she only had 320 on the whole ranch. Even selling everything would leave her short, and with no breeding stock, she would have nothing left to rebuild. The land itself was worth far more, which was exactly why Pittman wanted it. Probably had already promised it to one of the wealthy cattlemen who ran their operations from San Francisco and saw Oregon rangeland as just another investment. Charlie found her there after sunset, still sitting in the growing dark. The old cowboy had worked for her father since the beginning, his face weathered like ancient leather, his hands gnarled but still steady. "You ought to eat something, Miss Delilah." "I ought to figure out how to save this ranch." He pulled out a chair and sat down with a heavy sigh. "Your pa would not want you to break yourself trying to hold on to dirt and grass. This dirt and grass is all I have. It is all I am." She finally looked at him, letting him see the desperation she had been hiding. Tell me honestly, Charlie, can I do this? Honestly, not alone. You need a full crew and no man in Pendleton will work for a woman boss. You need someone to negotiate with the buyers and the railroad, and they will cheat you blind if you go yourself. You need more breeding stock and better water access, and all of that needs money you do not have. He paused, his roomy eyes kind. But maybe you are asking the wrong question. What is the right question? Not can you do it, but who could help you do it? She spent a sleepless night considering his words. Pride had gotten her father killed, his refusal to back down from a fight with someone who could afford better gunmen. Pride would get her killed too, or at least broken if she could not swallow it long enough to ask for help. But who would help a woman with no money and a failing ranch? Her mother had been dead for 10 years, and her extended family back east had cut ties when her father moved west to chase his dreams. She had no suitors, having spent more time with horses than with people, and her sharp tongue had discouraged the few men brave enough to try courting her. The answer came 2 days later in the form of a stranger riding up to her house on a buckskin gelding that moved like water over stones. Delilah was fixing the porch rail that had rotted through, hammer in hand and nails between her teeth, when she noticed him. He sat his horse with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle, tall and lean with dark hair that brushed his collar beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He looked to be maybe 26 or 27, old enough to have earned the weathered look around his eyes but young enough to still move with quick confidence. She pulled the nails from her mouth and stood, aware of how she must look in her father's old shirt and pants, her hair tied back with a fraying ribbon. "Can I help you?" He touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "Madam, I am looking for Daniel Dawson. Heard he might have work." "Daniel Dawson is dead. I am his daughter." Something flickered across his face, sympathy maybe, or calculation. "I am sorry for your loss. I am Samuel Jensen. I have been working ranches since I was 14, moving up from Texas. Good with cattle, better with horses, and I can fix most anything that breaks." He paused, his eyes taking in the broken fence visible beyond the barn, the sagging roof that needed patching, the general air of disrepair that had crept in during her father's illness and after. "Looks like you could use the help." Pride warred with desperation. She thought of the $8,000, of the cut fences and the scattered cattle, of the 2 old men trying to do the work of 6. Charlie's words echoed in her mind. Not can you do it, but who could help you do it? "I cannot pay much. Room and board and $30 a month if we make it to fall without losing everything." That is honest, at least. He swung down from his horse with fluid grace. "But I have a different proposition if you are willing to hear it. I am listening." Samuel Jensen pulled off his hat and held it in both hands, meeting her eyes directly. His own were gray like storm clouds, serious but not unkind. "I have been working for other men's dreams my whole life. I am good at what I do, but I have nothing to show for it except a good horse and the clothes on my back. You need help, and I need a future. What if instead of wages, we made this a partnership? I work the ranch alongside you, make it profitable again, and in return I get a stake in it. A third, maybe, or whatever you think is fair." Delilah felt her spine stiffen. "This is my family's land, and it will stay that way. I am not asking you to marry me or sign it all over." He said it plainly, without offense. "I am asking to earn my place here. You need hands and I have them. You need someone who can deal with the men in town who will not respect a woman's word, and like it or not, that is how it is. I work myself to the bone for a year, prove I can help turn this place around, and then we talk terms. If it does not work out, I move on with nothing but the experience." "Why would you do that? You could find paying work anywhere." "Because I am tired of making other men rich. Because I see a woman who is about to lose everything trying to prove she does not need help, and I admire that even if it is foolish. And because sometimes you have to take a risk if you want something better than what you have." He put his hat back on. "But it is your choice, Miss Dawson. I will ride on if you say the word and no hard feelings." She should have sent him away. Every instinct her father had drilled into her said never trust a stranger, never give up control, never show weakness. But Charlie was right, she could not do this alone, and Samuel Jensen was offering exactly what she needed, even if the cost was higher than $30 a month. "If you steal from me or try to take advantage, I will shoot you myself." The corner of his mouth lifted in something that was almost a smile. "Fair enough. And we do not talk about partnership or ownership until this ranch is profitable again. You work for wages and the promise of more, nothing guaranteed. Agreed. Then you can put your horse in the barn and get settled in the bunkhouse. We start work at dawn, and I do not tolerate lazy men." "Yes, madam." He turned to lead his horse away, then paused. "Miss Dawson, thank you. I will not let you down." She watched him walk toward the barn, wondering if she had just saved her ranch or doomed it faster. Only time would tell, and she had precious little of that. Samuel proved himself before the sun set that first day. He settled his horse, introduced himself to Charlie and Pete with respectful deference to their experience, then walked the entire property with Delilah to survey what needed doing. He did not flinch at the scope of the problems, just produced a small notebook from his pocket and started making lists. His questions were sharp and practical, showing he understood ranching on a level that went beyond simple labor. "How many springs feed your water?" "3, but the main one is running low. My father thought someone upstream might be diverting it. We will need to ride up and check. Cattle will not last summer on 2 springs for this much land." He made a note. "What about your breeding program?" "My father bought good bulls from California stock. We have 2 left after selling 3 to make ends meet. Not enough genetic diversity. We need at least 1 more unrelated bull, maybe 2. Another note. "And your market?" "We have been selling to the railroad buyers when they come through, but they set the prices and it is never enough." Samuel nodded slowly. "There are better buyers in Portland if we can drive a herd there. More risk, but better reward. We should consider it for fall if we have the numbers." By the time they returned to the house, Delilah's head was spinning with possibilities and problems in equal measure. Samuel excused himself to get cleaned up, and she went inside to cook supper for the 4 men, a task that felt both familiar and strange. Her father had always sat at the head of the table, and seeing his chair empty made her chest tight. The men ate with the efficient silence of those who worked hard for their food. Samuel complimented the stew, which was nothing special, but he seemed genuine. After the dishes were cleared, he and Charlie fell into conversation about the best approach to repairing the north fence, their voices carrying the easy rhythm of 2 men who spoke the same language of land and labor. Pete, who was barely 20 and shy as a church mouse, cleared his throat. "Miss Delilah, if you do not mind me saying, it is good to have another strong back around here. Charlie and me, we have been worried. I appreciate you boys staying on. Your pa was good to us. We will see you through this if we can." He ducked his head, his ears turning red at his own boldness. That night, Delilah lay in her narrow bed and listened to the ranch settling around her. For the first time since her father died, she felt the smallest spark of hope, fragile as a candle flame but present. Samuel Jensen might be a stranger, and he might be angling for more than he deserved, but he was here and he was willing to work. That had to count for something. The next morning, she found him already in the barn when she arrived, mucking stalls with his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked up as she entered, his face already sheened with sweat despite the cool morning air. Figured I would get a start on the dirty work. That is Pete's usual job. Pete is out riding the fence line with Charlie. I sent them to check for more cuts. He drove the pitchfork into the soiled hay and leaned on it. Miss Dawson, we need to talk about who is doing this to you. I have my suspicions. Suspicions do not stop bullets or cut fences. If someone wants this land badly enough to drive you off it, they will not stop until they succeed or you make them stop. Delilah crossed her arms, hating that he was right. The biggest rancher in the area is Marcus Thornton. He has 10,000 acres west of here, and he has been buying up smaller spreads for years. He made my father an offer a month before he died, and when my father refused, there was a confrontation in town. Thornton said my father would regret choosing pride over sense. And a month later your father is dead. Shot by someone we never identified. The sheriff said it was probably a drifter, but the man who shot him was a professional. Clean kill from 100 yards. Samuel's jaw tightened. And now you are alone on land that Thornton wants, with a debt coming due that will force you to sell. Convenient. I cannot prove anything. Then we need to make it not worth his while. If this ranch succeeds, if you make that payment and show you are not going anywhere, he will have to either leave you alone or make a move so obvious the law cannot ignore it. He picked up the pitchfork again, which means we have 7 months to work a miracle. No pressure then. He flashed that almost smile again. I do my best work under pressure. They fell into a routine over the following weeks that was punishing in its intensity. Samuel worked with the single-minded focus of a man on a mission, up before dawn and collapsing into his bunk long after dark. He fixed fences, repaired buildings, doctored sick cattle, and broke 2 wild horses to saddle, all while teaching Delilah the business side of ranching her father had never shared. They spent evenings going over the books together at the kitchen table, his shoulder nearly touching hers as he showed her how to project costs and calculate profit margins. You have to think like a business owner, not just a rancher, he explained one night in early April, rain drumming on the roof. Every decision is about numbers. Can you afford to keep a cow that is not producing? Is it cheaper to fix old equipment or buy new? When do you sell versus when do you hold stock hoping for better prices? My father never talked about any of this. A lot of ranchers do not. They go by instinct and tradition, and sometimes that works, but the ones who survive understand the money side. He tapped the ledger. You are smart, Miss Dawson. You can learn this. Delilah, she said suddenly. If we are going to be partners, you should call me Delilah. Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that had not been there before. Then you should call me Samuel, not Hey You or Jensen like you do half the time. I will try. She found herself smiling, really smiling for the first time in weeks, though Hey You has a certain efficiency to it. Cannot argue with that. The easy moment broke when Charlie burst through the door, water streaming from his hat. We got trouble. Found 3 steers shot dead in the South Ravine, all bearing the Rocking D brand. This was not about theft. Someone just wanted them dead. Delilah felt ice settle in her stomach. Samuel stood, his face hardening into something dangerous. Show me. The ride out was miserable, rain turning the ground to sucking mud. The dead cattle lay where they had fallen, their bodies already being worked over by coyotes and ravens. Samuel examined them with grim thoroughness, then pointed to the ridge above. Shooter was up there. See the angle of the wounds. He picked them off one by one, calm as you please. Professional again. Charlie spat in the mud. Same as what got Daniel, probably. Thornton is escalating, testing to see if we will break. Samuel turned to Delilah. We need to post guards at night. 2-man shifts armed, and we need to make it known in town that we are not backing down. That could start a war. We are already in a war. The question is whether we fight or surrender. His gray eyes were steel. What is it going to be, Delilah? She looked at her dead cattle, at the waste of good animals killed to frighten her, and felt anger burn through the fear. We fight. The next day, Samuel rode into Pendleton while Delilah stayed back to organize the guard schedule. He returned in the late afternoon with a hard set to his mouth and bruised knuckles. What happened? Had a conversation with some of Thornton's men at the saloon. They suggested it might be healthier for me to move on to a different ranch. I suggested they could try making me. He flexed his hand, wincing. The bartender broke it up before it got too serious, but the message was delivered on both sides. You are going to get yourself killed. Not planning on it. He met her eyes. But I am not going to let them think they can scare us off with threats and dead cattle. Sometimes you have to show teeth before someone will respect you. Delilah wanted to argue, but she understood the logic even if it terrified her. In this world, weakness was an invitation to be devoured. Samuel was making it clear that the rocking D would not be an easy meal. That night, she took the first guard shift with Pete while Samuel and Charlie slept. They sat on the porch with rifles across their laps, watching the darkness and listening to the cattle settle. Pete was quiet for a long time before speaking. Samuel is different than most drifters. How so? Most men like that. They are running from something. They do not look you in the eye, do not make plans past next week. But Samuel talks about this place like he means to be here a while. Pete shifted his weight. Just thought you should know. He seems solid. She considered that after Pete lapsed back into silence. Samuel did seem solid, steady in a way that went beyond simple reliability. He approached the ranch like it was already his, not with arrogance but with the care of someone who understood that his future was tied to its success. And there was something else, something she had been trying not to notice. The way her pulse quickened when he walked into a room, the way she found herself watching him work with more than professional interest, the way his rare smiles made warmth bloom in her chest. It was foolish. He was an employee, maybe a future partner, and she could not afford to complicate that with feelings. She had a ranch to save and no time for romance. But her heart, it seemed, had not consulted her practical mind before deciding to betray her. May brought warmer weather and a crisis that made the previous troubles seem manageable. Charlie rode in from checking the main spring with his face drawn tight. It is down to a trickle. Someone definitely diverted it upstream. Without that water, we will not make it through summer. Samuel and Delilah rode out immediately, following the creek bed up into the hills. The damage was clever, disguised to look natural unless you knew what to seek. Someone had built a dam of rocks and logs a mile above her property line, diverting most of the flow into a new channel that led toward Thornton's range. This took time and effort, Samuel said, studying the construction. This was not a quick sabotage. Someone planned this. Can we tear it down? If we do, it is destruction of property, assuming Thornton claims the dam is on his land. He could have you arrested. He rubbed his jaw, thinking. But if we prove he built it to damage your water rights, that is theft. We need evidence. They spent the next week gathering that evidence, riding out before dawn to watch the dam and photograph the setup with a borrowed camera. Samuel's careful documentation paid off when they showed the sheriff. A tired man named Garrett who clearly wanted nothing to do with a range war but could not ignore obvious proof of water theft. The confrontation came on a Thursday. Sheriff Garrett, Samuel, and Delilah rode out to meet Marcus Thornton at his sprawling ranch house, a monument to wealth with its whitewashed walls and imported furniture. Thornton himself was a bull of a man in his 50s, gray-haired and confident, used to getting his way. "Miss Dawson, what a surprise." His smile was all teeth. "To what do I owe this visit?" Sheriff Garrett shifted uncomfortably. "Someone diverted the main spring that feeds the rocking D. Looks like the water is flowing onto your property now." "Is that so?" "Well, water flows where it will. Nature is unpredictable. Nature did not build a dam with tools and lumber." Samuel produced the photographs, his voice level but hard. "This was deliberate, and it is theft of water rights. Either you tear it down or we do, and then we press charges." Thornton's smile vanished. "You must be the new hired hand I have been hearing about. Jensen, is it? I heard you have been filling Miss Dawson's head with ideas about fighting battles she cannot win. I am teaching her to recognize bullies when she sees them. Careful, boy. Men who insult me tend to have short, unhappy lives." "Is that a threat, Mr. Thornton?" Sheriff Garrett's hand drifted toward his gun. "Because threatening someone in front of a lawman is a good way to end up in a cell." Thornton forced his expression back to something resembling civility. "Of course not, Sheriff. I am merely stating facts." He turned to Delilah. "Your father was a stubborn fool who would not recognize an opportunity if it bit him. I offered him a fair price for land he could not properly manage, and he spat in my face. I had nothing to do with his death, but I will not pretend I mourned it. Now here you are, playing rancher with your pet cowboy, drowning in debt and thinking you can stand against me. Tear down the dam, Mr. Thornton." Delilah's voice was steady despite the rage burning through her. "Or I will see you in court, and I will make sure everyone in Oregon knows that the great Marcus Thornton has to cheat and steal to compete with a woman and 2,000 acres. The threat hit home. She could see it in the way his face purpled, the way his hands clenched into fists. A man like Thornton lived on reputation and respect. Public humiliation would cost him more than any legal battle. "Fine. I will have my men investigate this alleged dam and remove it if it is found to be interfering with natural water flow. But do not think this is over, Miss Dawson. You are going to fail, and when you do, I will buy your land from the bank for a fraction of what I offered your father, and there will not be a thing you can do about it." They left before Thornton could escalate further. On the ride back, Delilah felt her hands shaking with delayed reaction. Samuel reached over and briefly touched her shoulder, a steadying presence. "You did good back there. That took courage." "I was terrified. Bravery is not about not being scared. It is about being scared and doing it anyway." He glanced at her, something warm in his expression. "You keep surprising me, Delilah Dawson." "You keep surprising me too, Samuel Jensen." The dam was dismantled within 2 days, and water flowed back into the main spring. It was a victory, but a costly one. Thornton was now openly hostile, and every rancher in the region knew there was bad blood between them. Delilah found herself isolated in town, other women crossing the street to avoid her, shopkeepers suddenly remembering debts her father had left unpaid. Only a few stood by her. The widow who ran the mercantile and believed women should support each other, the young doctor who had tried and failed to save her father, and old Tom at the livery who had known her since she was a girl. Samuel took the brunt of the social punishment, being refused service at the saloon and warned away from poker games and dances. He bore it with the same quiet steadiness he brought to everything else, never complaining, never suggesting they should back down. "You ever regret staying?" Delilah asked him one evening in June. They were working together to rebuild a section of corral fence, the sun setting in ribbons of orange and purple across the sky. "No. Why would I?" "Because you could have found easier work, safer work, somewhere you would not be persona non grata." He paused in hammering a post, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I told you when I arrived, I was tired of working for other people's dreams. This is the first place I have felt like I am building something that matters, something that could be mine." He looked at her directly. "Besides, the company is better than I expected." Her breath caught. There was something in his eyes, something that went beyond partnership or friendship. She had been trying to ignore the growing awareness between them, the way their hands would brush when passing tools, the way conversations would stretch late into the night, the way she caught herself watching him and found him watching her in return. "Samuel, I know this complicates things." He set down the hammer. "I know you have a ranch to save and you do not need a cowboy mooning over you like a green kid, but I would be lying if I said I was just here for the work anymore. You matter to me, Delilah, more than I planned on." She should have shut it down, kept things professional. But she was tired of being alone, tired of pretending she did not feel the same pull toward him. Life was short and uncertain, as her father's death had proven, and happiness was not guaranteed if you waited for the perfect time. "You matter to me too," she admitted quietly. "I did not want you to. I thought I did not have room in my life for anything except saving this ranch, but somehow you became part of what I am fighting for." He crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. "Can I kiss you? You better." His mouth was warm and sure against hers, tasting of coffee and possibility. Delilah leaned into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, feeling something fierce and tender unfold in her chest. This was dangerous and impractical and exactly what she needed. When they finally broke apart, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "We are going to save this ranch and then we are going to build something amazing here, together. That is quite a promise. I am good at keeping promises." The kiss changed things between them in ways both subtle and profound. They were still partners working to save the ranch, but now there was tenderness woven through their days, stolen moments in the barn, hands held while reviewing ledgers, goodnight kisses that left them both wanting more. Charlie and Pete pretended not to notice, but Delilah caught the old cowboy grinning to himself more than once. July brought the crucial work of preparing the herd for market. Samuel and Charlie spent long days working with the cattle, separating those ready to sell from breeding stock, treating injuries and illness, and pushing the animals to better grazing to fatten them up. Delilah worked alongside them, her body lean and hard from the constant labor, her hands rough and capable. They were working late one evening when riders approached in the gathering dusk. Delilah felt her stomach drop as she recognized Thornton leading a group of 6 armed men. Samuel moved closer to her, his hand resting on his gun. "Evening, Miss Dawson." Thornton reined in his horse, his face unreadable in the shadows. "I thought we should have a talk one more time. I have nothing to say to you." "Then listen. You have until October to come up with $8,000. You and I both know that is not going to happen. So here is my final offer. I will pay you $6,000 for the land right now. That is enough to settle your debt and have something left over to start fresh somewhere else. Take it and all of this unpleasantness ends. The land is worth 3 times that. Maybe to someone who has the time and money to develop it properly, but you are out of time and out of money. This is the best offer you are going to get." He leaned forward in his saddle. "Last chance, Miss Dawson. After this, whatever happens is on you." Samuel stepped forward. "She said no. Now get off her property before I make you leave." One of Thornton's men laughed. "Big talk for one cowboy against 6. He is not alone." Charlie emerged from the barn with his rifle, Pete beside him carrying a shotgun. "And this is private property. You are trespassing." The tension stretched thin and dangerous. Delilah could see Thornton calculating odds, weighing his desire to crush her against the risk of open violence with witnesses. Finally, he straightened in his saddle. "Have it your way. But when you lose everything, do not come crying to me." He wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. Delilah did not realize she was shaking until Samuel pulled her into his arms. "It is okay, he is gone. For now, but he will be back, and next time he might not just talk. Then we will deal with it together." He tilted her chin up. "You are not alone in this fight anymore, Delilah. You have me, and I am not going anywhere." That night, lying in her bed, Delilah made a decision. She rose and walked across the yard to the bunkhouse, her nightgown ghostly in the moonlight. Samuel was sitting on the steps, unable to sleep, and he stood when he saw her approach. "Delilah, is something wrong? I do not want to be alone tonight." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." He took her hand and led her inside to his narrow bunk in the corner. They undressed each other slowly in the darkness, every touch reverent and certain. When he lowered her onto the thin mattress, Delilah felt something inside her unlock, some guardedness she had carried since her father died finally releasing its grip. Their lovemaking was tender and urgent, a claiming that went both ways. Afterward, wrapped in Samuel's arms with his heartbeat strong beneath her ear, Delilah felt peace settle over her. "I love you," she whispered. "I know it is fast and complicated, but I do. I love you too." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Have since that first week, if I am being honest, tried to tell myself it was just attraction, but it was always more than that. What are we going to do? Same thing we have been doing. Work ourselves half to death saving this ranch so we can have a future." He tightened his arms around her. "But now we know exactly what that future looks like." August was a blur of preparation. Samuel arranged a deal with a buyer in Portland who would pay premium prices for quality cattle, but it meant driving the herd over 200 miles through rough country. It was a massive risk. They could lose animals to injury, illness, or theft. And if they did not make the delivery in time, the buyer would cancel the contract, and they would lose their best chance at the money they needed. "We will take the best 150 head, Samuel explained. The 5 of them gathered around a map spread on the kitchen table. "That leaves enough breeding stock here and gives us cattle worth top dollar. Delilah, you and I will lead the drive with 2 more hired hands I trust from my time in Texas. Charlie and Pete stay here to guard the ranch." "That will leave this place vulnerable," Charlie protested. "Thornton is going to make a move whether we are here or not." "But if he destroys an empty ranch, we can rebuild. If we do not get that money to the bank, it does not matter if the ranch is intact or not, we lose it anyway." It was sound logic, but Delilah hated leaving Charlie and Pete to face any trouble alone. Still, they needed the money desperately, and this was their best shot. Samuel's 2 friends arrived in mid-August. Jack Calloway and Thomas Reed, both weathered cowboys in their 30s who treated Samuel with the respect of men who had been tested together. They took one look at the operation and got to work without complaint, helping to finalize preparations for the drive. They left on a clear morning in late August, 150 head of cattle lowing and shuffling as they were pushed onto the trail north. Delilah rode point with Samuel, her heart in her throat as she looked back at the ranch disappearing behind the hills. Everything she had ever known was tied to that land, and she was leaving it on the slim hope that this gamble would pay off. The drive was brutal. The weather alternated between scorching heat and torrential rain. They lost 6 cattle in the first week, 3 to injury, 2 to sickness, and 1 swept away crossing a swollen river. Every loss felt like a knife to the gut, money and hope bleeding away. They worked 18-hour days, rotating watch through the nights, always exhausted and saddle sore. But there were beautiful moments, too. Camping under stars so thick they looked like spilled salt. Samuel playing a battered harmonica by the fire. the easy camaraderie of people working toward a shared goal, and the private moments when Samuel and Delilah would steal away from camp, his touch and whispered words reminding her why she was fighting so hard. "When this is over, when the ranch is secure, I want to marry you," Samuel said one night, their bodies pressed close in their shared bedroll. "If you will have me." "Is that a proposal, Samuel Jensen? Not the one you deserve. That one will have a ring and pretty words and a proper setting, but I wanted you to know my intentions so there is no doubt about where my heart is. I will absolutely have you." She kissed him, tasting joy and certainty. "But you are right. You need to ask me properly when we are not covered in trail dust and cattle smell. Deal." They reached Portland on a Tuesday in mid-September, driving the remaining 144 head through streets that were too narrow and past citizens who were not accustomed to cattle. The buyer, a shrewd man named Foster, inspected the herd with a critical eye while Delilah held her breath. "Good quality," he finally admitted. "Better than most of what I see coming out of Oregon. I will give you $32 a head." "The contract said 35, Samuel countered. "The contract also said 150 head. You are short 6. We lost them on the drive through no fault of our own. The cattle we delivered are exactly what you asked for." They haggled for an hour, brutal and exhausting, before finally settling on $33 a head. It came to $4,752, paid in banknotes that Foster counted out with exaggerated care. Delilah wanted to collapse with relief. It was not quite enough to cover the debt and interest, but it was close, and they still had cattle back at the ranch they could sell locally to make up the difference. The ride back was faster and lighter without the herd to slow them. They made it home in 9 days instead of 3 weeks, arriving saddle sore and exhausted to find Charlie and Pete waiting with grim faces. "Thornton's men came by 3 times while you were gone," Charlie reported. "Cut fences, shot at the house one night, drove off about 20 head we have not been able to recover, but we held." "Anyone hurt?" Pete took a bullet through his arm, but the doc patched him up. "We gave as good as we got. Don't think they expected us to fight back so hard." Delilah felt rage and relief war inside her. "Thank you for keeping it safe. This is our home too, Miss Delilah. We were not about to let anyone take it." The final 2 weeks before the payment was due were a scramble. They rounded up every remaining marketable steer and sold them at the local stockyard for less than they were worth, but enough to close the gap. Delilah counted and recounted the money, barely believing they had actually done it. On October 1st, she and Samuel rode into Pendleton to the bank. Horace Pittman looked surprised and disappointed to see them, his small eyes narrowing as Samuel placed $8,314 on the desk between them. "This covers the debt plus interest through today," Samuel said calmly. "We want a receipt and the note marked paid in full." Pittman counted the money twice, clearly looking for a reason to refuse it, but the numbers were exact. He produced the paperwork with visible reluctance, stamping it with more force than necessary. "I suppose congratulations are in order, Miss Dawson. I did not think you had it in you. Then you do not know her very well." Samuel took the papers and offered Delilah his arm. "Let's go home." Walking out of that bank felt like breaking through water after being held under too long. Delilah gulped in the autumn air, feeling lighter than she had in months. They had done it. Against all odds, they had saved the ranch. The celebration that night was simple but heartfelt. Charlie produced a bottle of whiskey he had been saving, and they toasted their success by firelight. But Delilah's mind was already racing ahead to everything that still needed doing: rebuilding fences, replacing lost cattle, preparing for winter. The work never ended. Samuel must have read her thoughts. "One day at a time," he murmured in her ear. "Tonight we celebrate, tomorrow we plan." 2 days later, he asked her properly. They were riding out to check the north pasture, the autumn air crisp and the leaves turning gold on the aspens. Samuel reined in his horse near the creek where they had first kissed and swung down from the saddle. "Delilah, can you come here for a minute?" She dismounted, curious. He took her hand and dropped to one knee, producing a ring that glinted in the afternoon sun. It was simple silver set with a small sapphire, beautiful in its plainness. "I do not have a grand speech prepared," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I am just a cowboy who got lucky enough to find a woman who is stronger, smarter, and braver than anyone I have ever met. You saved me from a life of drifting, gave me a home and a purpose and a future. I love you more than I thought possible. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. "Yes. Absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, catching her as she launched herself into his arms. Their kiss was joy and promise, sealing a partnership that had been forged in hardship and tempered by love. They married in November, a small ceremony in the ranch house with Charlie and Pete as witnesses, and the circuit preacher performing the service. Delilah wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and Samuel wore a new suit that made him look unfamiliar and handsome. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, she felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. "You are stuck with me now," she whispered as they danced to Charlie's fiddle playing, Pete clapping time. "Best thing that ever happened to me. That winter was hard but manageable." They had enough money to restock breeding cattle and make necessary repairs. Thornton left them alone, perhaps recognizing that Delilah was not going to be easily driven off, or perhaps just biding his time for another opportunity. Delilah did not care. She had Samuel beside her, a ranch that was truly theirs and hope for the future. In March, she realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with equal parts terror and delight. Samuel was overjoyed, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach, his eyes bright with dreams of their child. "Boy or girl, does not matter," he said, "as long as they are healthy and stubborn like their mother, and steady like their father." They worked through her pregnancy, Samuel taking on more of the physical labor as she grew larger. By October 1885, she was moving slowly, her belly swollen and her back aching, but still insisting on reviewing accounts and making decisions. Their son was born on a cold night in late October, his first cry strong and indignant. Samuel held the boy with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "What should we name him?" Delilah asked, exhausted and triumphant. "Daniel," Samuel said immediately, "after your father, so he knows where he comes from." "Daniel Jensen," she smiled, touching her son's tiny, perfect fingers. "Welcome to the rocking D, little one." The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing slowly but steadily. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah in 1887 and another son, James, in 1889. The house rang with children's laughter, and the land flourished under careful stewardship. Charlie passed away in the winter of 1891, old age and a hard life finally catching up to him. They buried him on the ranch he had loved, under a cottonwood tree where he used to sit and smoke his pipe. Pete stayed on, eventually becoming foreman and marrying a girl from town who did not mind ranch life. Thornton made one more attempt at causing trouble in 1893, but by then, the Rocking D was well established, and Delilah had allies in the ranching community. His efforts went nowhere, and he finally accepted that she was there to stay. He died in 1896, and his children sold off his land piece by piece, unable to manage what their father had built through intimidation and greed. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Delilah sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Daniel was a serious boy of 9, already showing his grandfather's stubbornness. Sarah was 7 and wild as a Mustang, fearless in everything she did. James was 5 and thoughtful, content to watch the world and figure out how it worked. "Do you ever regret it?" Delilah asked, her head resting on Samuel's shoulder. "Gambling on me and this ranch? Never. Not for a single day." He kissed her temple. "Best decision I ever made was asking if you needed a partner." "I did not just need a partner, I needed you specifically." She turned to face him. "You saved my life in more ways than one, Samuel Jensen. We saved each other." He took her hand, the sapphire ring catching the last light of sunset. "And we are going to keep building this life together, for as long as we both live." They did exactly that. Through hard times and good, through drought and plenty, they worked side by side, making the Rocking D one of the most successful ranches in Oregon. Their children grew and eventually took over the operation, and then their grandchildren after that, each generation adding to the legacy that had started with a desperate woman and a cowboy who saw potential where others saw only failure. When Delilah was old and gray, sitting on that same porch with Samuel's hand in hers, she would think back to that moment when he first rode up and asked if she needed help. She had been alone and terrified, certain she would lose everything her family had built. Instead, she found a partner who became her husband, her best friend, and the love of her life. "Tell me again about when you first met Grandpa," her granddaughter would ask, curled up at her feet, and Delilah would smile and begin the story, the words familiar and comforting as an old song. "I was running the ranch alone after my father died, trying to figure out how to do the work of 6 men by myself. And then one day, this cowboy rode up and asked if I needed a partner. And you said yes." I said yes. Best decision I ever made. The ranch that had almost been lost became a thriving operation that lasted for generations. But its true legacy was not in the land or cattle. It was in the love story that began with 2 people taking a chance on each other, building something beautiful from desperation and hard work and stubborn determination. Samuel passed away in the winter of 1919, pneumonia taking him quickly despite the best efforts of modern medicine. Delilah held his hand as he slipped away, his last words a whispered "I love you" that she carried with her through the grief. She lived another 5 years, long enough to see her great-grandchildren born, long enough to know that everything she and Samuel had built would endure. When she died peacefully in her sleep in 1924, they buried her next to Samuel on the hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple and side by side. The inscription reads simply, "Delilah Dawson Jensen, 1861–1924, and Samuel Jensen, 1858–1919. Beloved partners." But the true story was written in the land itself, in the strong fences and thriving cattle, in the house that still stood sturdy and welcoming, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their names and their legacy forward. The story of a woman who refused to give up and a man who saw her strength and offered his own, building something that would outlast them both. The Rocking D Ranch still operates today, still in the family, still bearing the brand that Daniel Dawson created all those years ago. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blows through the grass and the cattle low in the distance, some say you can still feel the presence of the 2 who started it all, forever intertwined, forever partners in the truest sense of the word. Their love story became legend in Pendleton, told and retold until it was hard to separate fact from embellishment. But the core truth remained unchanged. When Delilah Dawson needed a partner most, Samuel Jensen appeared and offered not just his labor but his heart. And together, They proved that love and determination could overcome any obstacle, build any dream, and create a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The story of the Rocking D Ranch is ultimately a story about taking chances, about trusting in the possibility of new beginnings even when everything seems lost. It is about the courage to accept help when offered, and the wisdom to recognize that partnership is not weakness, but strength multiplied. Most of all, it is a story about love in its truest form, steady, practical, and utterly transformative. As the sun sets over the Oregon rangeland, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Rocking D Ranch stands as testament to what two people can build when they refuse to give up on each other or on their dreams. The legacy of Delilah and Samuel lives on, not just in the land they saved, but in the example they set for every generation that followed. That love, hard work, and unwavering partnership can overcome any challenge and create something beautiful that lasts forever.